Welcome back, everybody. Monday, November 13th. John Arvosis here, coming to you live from Chicago. It says DC up there, but it's not. I'm in Chicago now, visiting for a couple months. Welcome all. Introduce yourselves. I will get TikTok rolling on my iPad here. Just getting set up here in Chicago, so it's always going to be glitchy. My first day or two back, it's always weird getting everything set up again. Here we go. TikTok, including my microphone, which hopefully is working. God only knows. So we shall see. It was already playing games with me. And I had to buy some new stuff from Amazon for my laptop. I've got this on top of a USPS box. Go live. All right. Boom. Anyway, hello all. All right. There we go. There's TikTok rolling in. All right. Do this and that, and we are done. All righty. Mom is good. Mom is good. Hanging in there. Turning 94 next month. Very scary. So she's doing well. Yep, I made it with Sasha. Sasha had a tumultuous trip to Chicago, but otherwise it was good. She freaked out on the plane, which she's never done before. It was kind of scary, but it made me like totally freak. Anyway, hey guys, welcome on TikTok. But she's good now. I am in Chicago this month, 2 months actually, till New Year's. So you get the wonderful Chicago look. Woo! What's new with Ukraine? Stuff. We'll go through it. Okay amount of Ukraine news. Hey, Von Sparklebum. Thank you. Yeah, no, things are good here. Sasha's good. She's on the chair next to me. Well, you guys, I can TikTok. It's easier to show. There you go. Oops. I think you can see though. There's Sasha on the chair next to me. Oops. It's hard to, you can see her there. It's hard to like hold it well for you to see. Thank you. Who is that? Thank you, John S. and Pedro. Oh, I know the paneling. It's very 1970s. Actually, it was before 70s. Since we bought the house in the 70s, it would have been before we got here. So very 1960s Midwest. I still like it, actually. I grew up with it, so I enjoy the paneling. Hey, Jeremy, thank you for that. And Cammie. It's warm today. I'm actually surprised. It got up to like 60 in Chicago. Thank you, Shane, which is very warm. I mean, for November. Friday, I took the day off because I was getting ready to fly Saturday. Thank you, Marcy, to Chicago to visit Ma. Thank you, Napoleon. So I decided Friday was going thank you, Kim, was going very slowly. Thank you, Timmy. So I finally was like, I can't do the show. I was going nuts trying to get stuff done. I know the music came back on the one video. If anybody noticed on TikTok, I just left it. I mean, once you guys talk, at least it wasn't like, happy, crazy music, because it was like a video about Gaza. No, it was a video about Ukraine or Gaza. It was Gaza. Thank you, Adam. And I was like, I don't need videos about Gaza that have like dance music, but at least it was solemn music. Although somebody told me they think it was from World War Z, which perhaps is appropriate at the end of the world. So maybe it was a good thing. Thank you, Gordy. I'm saying Gordy. Anyway, hello guys. Yeah, no, I skipped Friday just so I could get packed and everything. I was behind on everything. So thank you, Succeed. And since I was leaving for a few months, I had a friend come over. He's house sitting. Thank you, Frumple. But there's a lot to do. Like when you leave for 2 months, I had to bring plants in and, all sorts of crazy stuff. So thank you, Joe. Big Hawk. Christmas. Well, plans to be here for Christmas. I know. I forgot, Christopher, to change the location on my thing here. I'll do it tomorrow. It requires me going into Photoshop, which isn't very hard. But hey, Pasha, thank you. And Adam. But I still have to do it, obviously. All right, guys. I think we can get rolling. Let's get started. So the way the show works is I'm thinking, just to mix things up, let's talk Ukraine first, and then we'll do Israel and Gaza. Thank you, Arifa. Yeah, let me pull this up. Where's my Ukraine? I've got a good deal of Ukraine stuff, actually, but still, let's do it that way. We could do Israel and Gaza second. Thank you, Shane. And Jordy again. So let's do that. So the way the show works is I will go through the news. I sort of try to cherry pick the news that I think is interesting throughout the day, to give you guys a sense for both Israel and Gaza and all of that battle, what's been going on. And also, thank you, James, for Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We'll talk about both. I will go through the news first, and then second half of the show, we do Q&A. The one thing, though, thank you, Jonathan, is I always am very happy about gifts, such as on TikTok right now from Jonathan and the others. So I always try to do a shout out for the big gifts that pop up on the screen. because the little ones I love too, but there's like so many that I don't have time. Thank you, Joe. Although occasionally when I see it, like People's Rose there. Thank you, People's. Thank you, Michael. So those gifts, I always try to do a shout out. Thank you, Ava. And for you guys on YouTube, you get a special thing because YouTube has set it up this way that you can ask a super chat question, where basically you pay for a question, and I'll still answer questions anyway as much as I can from all of you guys. But the super chats, as a thank you, I will always answer them immediately or when I'm done with my current thought. So that's the advantage of a super chat question. And frankly, you're also donating to support my work. So thank you for that. So let's get rolling, guys. So, Ukraine. So today is day 627 of Vladimir Putin's 3-day special military operation in Ukraine. Thank you, Alex, for the gift there. A senior, this was wild. So this was a crazy story this weekend. I say kind of funny. Maybe it's not funny. I actually think it's kind of funny. Thank you, Derek. If you're German, maybe it's less funny. We'll ask our German friends who are here today if this story is less funny or whether you think it's kind of funny too. Thank you, Alex. So, remember that pipeline? Thank you, Scott. The natural gas pipeline from Russia that came sort of across across like the Baltics, and then came down and not the Baltics, but it came across the Baltics and then Scandinavia, and then comes down into Germany. And somebody last year blew it up. Nord Stream 2, exactly. Well, the Washington Post this weekend says it might have been the Ukrainians. There was a report earlier that said it could have been the Ukrainians, right? Now, the only thing I will say is, there is still, I think, without seeing adjusting my light as I talk to you guys again, sort of getting things set up at mom's here. That's pretty good. Without actually seeing the evidence, who knows? The Ukrainian guy who they're accusing of it is saying it's Russian disinformation. It's a Russian. No, the Russians would try to plant information, blame it on the Ukrainians, of course. Thank you, Annie. Oh, that's cool. Thank you, Annie. That is cool. They would try to blame the Ukrainians anyway, but Washington Post did a joint investigation with Der Spiegel, a German publication. And let me read you a little bit from the Washington Post here, okay? A senior Ukrainian military officer with deep ties to the country's intelligence services played a central role in the bombing of the Nord Stream natural gas pipelines last year, according to officials in Ukraine and elsewhere in Europe, as well as other people knowledgeable about the details of the covert operation. Roman Chervinsky, a decorated 48-year-old colonel who served in Ukraine's Special Operations Force, was the coordinator of the Nord Stream operation. People familiar with his role said, managing logistics and support for a 6-person team that rented a sailboat under false identities and used deep sea diving equipment to place explosive charges on the gas pipeline. On September 26, 2022, 3 explosions caused massive leaks on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, which run from Russia to Germany under the Baltic Sea. The attack left only one of the 4 gas links in the network intact as winter approached. Chervinsky did not act alone, and he did not plan the operation, according to people familiar with his role, which has not been previously reported. The officer took orders from more senior Ukrainian officials who ultimately reported to General Zaluzhny, Ukraine's highest-ranking military officer, said people familiar with how the operation was carried out. Okay, so my question for you is, do you guys care? I'm really kind of curious. Thank you, Ellie. I have to tell you, I'm kind of finding it funny at this point that if Ukraine did this, thank you, Macabre, because there's a little part of me that's kind of going, damn. Like, damn. I didn't think Ukraine had it in them to do something like this. I just figured it was going to be too hard. Europe for Europeans says that's actually an act of war against Germany. Yeah. Well, is it actually who owns the pipeline? Is it Russian or is it German? It's confusing, though, because I know Germany kind of built it, but it's Russia's pipeline, right? It's like, who actually owns it? Thank you, Martin, for that. Right? Who does own it? Does anybody know that? Because it seems like it's the Russian pipeline, but it's also a Russian pipeline, right? Anyway, but what do you guys think? Does anybody care? I'm kind of, honestly, I probably should care, but there's a large part of me, like I said, that kind of goes, that's my Ukraine. What do you say? What do you do? What do you do? Anyway, so, oh, well, I do think it's pretty funny, to be honest. So that's what's up with that. We don't have anything more on it, but I think it's kind of funny. The pipeline smells of Russia. Ukraine couldn't afford to damage their support. That's the thing that I don't get. Thank you, Mundashi. I agree with Callum. I still feel like this was too edgy too quickly for Ukraine, right? Why would Ukraine do this when they were so desperate for Western support. Thank you, Amy. And by the way, thank you, user 816. When this, it's not like the pipeline was coming online and there was going to be a massive amount of gas and a massive amount of new money for Russia. It wasn't going that quickly. So I'm not quite sure. Remember, because Germany wasn't even going to finish the pipeline. Germany had to either approve it or something like that at the very end. The pipeline was done, but they didn't actually, at the U.S. request, thank you, Danon, or maybe U.S. pressure, Germany in the end didn't actually approve the pipeline starting. So that's what I don't get of Ukraine blowing it up. Why blow up a pipeline that Germany has already said we're not going to put into use? It doesn't make sense to me. Thank you, Danon. I'm with Callum on this. It still sounds to me like it was Russia. But, Washington Post is being quite detailed here. And I will say, thank you, Big John and Fanutis. The paper can get it wrong. With Iraq, the papers all got it wrong, right? With Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. But Washington Post is a very good newspaper. That's the only thing I'm saying. Like my gut is to typically trust the Washington Post on things because they're a very good paper. I don't know. So a Moonbeams is saying they're majority owned 51% by Russia, along with German, Dutch, and French stakeholders. Oh, that's interesting. They were financed by a consortium of companies from Russia, Germany, France, Austria, and the Netherlands. It was the first pipeline that bypassed Ukraine and Poland to deliver Russian natural gas directly to Western Europe. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. That's interesting then. Thank you, Danon. So it's actually everything we thought, which is it's Russian, but it is German, and it is a lot of everything else. Andrea says, I think it's funny too. I got to tell you guys, I'm sorry. If Ukraine did it, I still feel like an attaboy to Ukraine, attagirl, atta everybody, Anyway, what do you do? All right. Let's go on. We're going to continue doing Ukraine news, and then second half of the show, we'll do Israel Gaza news. Ukrainian Defense Intelligence claims it hit 2 small Russian naval vessels in the Black Sea on Friday. They released grainy grayscale video showing what it claims is the moment of the strikes. I did see the video. It looks like all the other video the Ukrainians release whenever they hit anything. But, very, very interesting. Thank you, Dadar. I almost didn't see it. I don't always see comments when I'm actually in the middle of the show at this point. I just happened to see yours. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So Avdiivka, here's my map. Actually, it's cute. My mom gave me a pointer she had that was my dad's. He was a big executive at International Harvester back in the day. And this was an engine that was a big deal. DT466 means nothing to me, but it was like a huge engine for International Harvester. And it's the little pointer. But I feel like Harry Potter. It's like, Avada Kedavra. But anyway, I thought this was kind of cute. So I'm going to use it as my little mini pointer. So we're going to have an Avdiivka, I'll try to say it pronounced correctly, update. So Avdiivka, little town northwest of Donetsk, right here. Okay. Now remember, all of this controlled by Russia. Okay. All of this here. So right outside of Donetsk, town controlled by Ukraine, Avdiivka. It's Ukraine, of course, but it's controlled by Ukraine. And the Russians have been just fighting like madmen in that town. Absolutely crazy. A lot of troops, a lot of weapons. Not doing great. The Ukrainians are well dug in. We are seeing a repeat of the Russians losing a lot of men and a lot of equipment, which is good. They're not really advancing. Well, CNN had an update on this. I'll just read it to you. The eastern town of Avdiivka is enclosed on 3 sides by Russian forces. They have been launching waves of assaults over the past month to complete the siege, but Ukrainian soldiers continue standing their ground and inflicting major losses on the occupiers, according to Ukraine's military. Other sources have said the same thing, that in fact the Ukrainians are basically putting major losses on the Russians, which is great for this. The weather has been unfavorable for Russian assaults with tracked vehicles. That has made the Russians change tactics, according to the Ukrainian military. The issue here is we have finally entered the rainy season in Ukraine, the precursor to winter. Winter comes, and of course, everything freezes over. Ukraine is very cold like Russia, okay? But to get to that point, you get this in-between season. Well, the in-between season is rainy. So all of a sudden, it's not just cold, it's cold and wet. Probably like Paris, I guess, because Paris is very much that way in winter too. And what happens is the ground gets muddy, and muddy ground is not great for tanks and other kind of vehicles, right? They can get stuck. It's also not good for troops either, troops trying to get through. So what happens is when you're trying to move vehicles on muddy ground, you end up having to move them to the streets, to the roads. So, but here's the problem. In areas like this, it's not like there's roads everywhere and highways everywhere, right? You've got a single or double lane road. There are no trees covering it. So the tanks and everything will be in a line on the road, and they'll be publicly available to all the counterfire from the enemy. So you really don't want your tanks up on a road in the middle of nowhere where the enemy can see them. So that's what they're saying now, is the conditions right now have gotten wet, and it is not amenable to the Russians trying to force an attack. So what CNN noted was Russian forces have been using more drones to target heavily defended Ukrainian positions and carrying out more assaults on foot using infantry. So rather than coming in with tanks and other vehicles, they're either using drones, thank you, Tom, or using infantry on foot. Also, it's funny, we'd asked Vlad about this during one of our lives we do on the weekend. My friend Vlad in Ukraine, who works a lot with the Ukrainian military, does a lot of other stuff. And Vlad was saying it is definitely harder to fly drones in the winter. Thank you, Ellie. You get a lot of issues. You do get icing on the wings, because that's an issue, right, for anything that flies. You get battery issues. Anybody who's ever tried to use your camera battery outside when it's freezing and the battery, it's like a ghost arrived. The battery just goes to zero. That happens with drones too. Batteries drain much more quickly. So he said, rain and snow and everything too. It just isn't great. So it very much depends. Thank you, Lisa. He said if the conditions are really good, drones are still good in the winter. Callum says drones in winter, the air is heavier because it's cold and wet. But what does that actually mean? The air is heavier. Thank you, Peach Umbrella. That it's actually it's harder to fly, or it takes more energy or more whatever to fly it, or what does it actually do? It can't carry as much, for example, or can it? Thank you, Bob. And so looking back here a little bit, forever. I don't want to sort of miss the gifts here. More dense, thicker, but what is that? How does that impact the flying is what I mean. More energy to fly because the air is thicker, basically. That's my question. Okay. So right, less lift. Okay. So it can't get as high. Thank you, Ellen. In other words, it takes more energy to get the drone to fly, to get it to fly higher. It's like there's resistance, basically. That means you're going to get less mileage out of it. Okay. Right. So that's what you're talking about. And my guess is going to be you're also going to get less, probably less payload, right? That it probably can carry less, I'm going to guess. Or is it just a matter of whatever it's carrying takes more energy to carry, basically? Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. And Orla for the rose there as well. Oh, I always forget that one. That one's got the cool different postcard at the end. Now, James Althouse has the engine. DT466 is an engine still around today. Well, there you go. Well, this was the pointer that International Harvester made to honor the engine. My dad worked on the engine. He was ended up being a VP of marketing. He ended up being the president of the Society of Automotive Engineers, which my geeky friends know and respect. Everyone else goes, okay. But I did have a friend who was like, woo. Dad was excited. There was one friend who knew what it was. Anyway, I continue. So that's Avdiivka. Oh, this is interesting. So Russia is still having issues with their trains getting knocked off track. So somebody, possibly Russians, possibly Ukrainians who have crossed the border, or they're Russians working with Ukrainians, keep sabotaging Russian railroads. Now, Russia has a very in-depth railroad system, and most of their logistics for getting weapons to the front line in Ukraine use weapons, manpower, the men, tanks, etc., use the railroads. So somebody's been sabotaging the railroads going to Ukraine. Thank you, Ava. Appreciate that. I left your map in DC, by the way, because it's already taped up. And once I got here, I realized I said, I didn't bring Ava's map with me. So people are going to get a break from Europe for 2 months. But thank you, Ava. So anyway, Russia's launched a formal investigation into the apparent derailment of a train by an improvised bomb on Saturday, or it was announced on Saturday. The bomb was placed on a section of track in Russia's Ryazan region, which I forgot to Google. Statement said the incident caused 19 cars of a freight train to derail. So good job, Russians. The U.S. purchased 60 Gepard anti-aircraft guns from Jordan to send to Ukraine. Let me read this again. The U.S. purchased 60 Gepard, German, basically, anti-aircraft guns from Jordan to send to Ukraine. The weapons originated from the Netherlands. This is great, too. Talk about like a confusing. The weapons originated from the Netherlands, which sold them to Jordan in 2013. And basically, the U.S. then bought them back and is providing them to Ukraine. What I liked about this story was it's good to see that there is still effort being made by the U.S. to get more weapons, which is good. Thank you, Angie. Germany will double its military aid to Ukraine for 2024. That's wonderful news. Remember, I always tell you guys, Germany is either great news or we want to slap Germany news. It's like two sides. Lately, Germany's been good Germany, which we've been very happy about. This is great news. Germany is going to double its military aid to Ukraine in 2024, raising the figure from 4 billion euros or $4.3 billion to 8 billion euros or $8.6 billion. F-16s, the training center for Ukrainian pilots to learn how to fly F-16s in Romania has now opened, so that's good. The 100th ship has departed through the Black Sea humanitarian corridor since August. This is interesting. Thank you, Adventures. This is the new corridor that the Ukrainians set up to basically get ships coming in and out of Ukrainian ports. Right here, Odessa and a little bit south of here. But the ships basically, the Russians threatened the ships. They even blew up a ship last week, or at least attacked it and killed somebody. The Russians are trying to stop basically any trade with Ukraine, especially wheat and other things, grain that Ukraine, sells a lot of. Well, the Ukrainians finally, or somebody came up with the idea to have the boats basically hug the coastline where Ukraine can more or less defend them. And then when it gets down here, I don't have Ava's map, but when it gets down here, you've got Romania. That's a NATO country. Okay. You get further down. Thank you, B. Smith. You get further down. You get Bulgaria, NATO country. You get further down here. I'm going to move my map. You get further down here. You get Turkey, NATO country. Well, if Ukraine hugs the border of the coast, they are always going to be in NATO territory. And if they're in NATO territory, Russia can't hit them because that would be, again, kind of an act of war if you go firing inside the territory of another country. So what is interesting to me is this story means that the ships are continuing to go, that it didn't stop the shipping. Because remember last week when Russia blew up that Liberian flagged tanker, I was convinced that that was going to be it for any ships coming in and out of Ukraine, that they would basically say, forget it, we're not coming in, it's too dangerous. Clearly somebody's still coming in. So that to me was very interesting. Let's see how it goes, right? But that's good news at least. Thank you, Joe, for I always forget. Beaver? Oh, groundhog. It even says there, groundhog. Thank you for the groundhog. A little more news. Hungary being bad. Hungary's not going to support the next disbursement of military aid for Ukraine from the European Union unless Ukraine promises to no longer put Hungarian companies on its international sponsors of war list. The problem is, of course, Hungary is an international sponsor of the war. Thank you, Western, for propaganda for that. Basically, Hungarian businesses are still working with Russia, and because Hungary's being just awful. It's whatever, but typical from Hungary now that they're threatening Ukraine's aid in the war unless Ukraine stops even verbally holding them accountable for helping Russia in the war. I really hate that country. I mean, it's funny. I still am trying to figure out, at some point to go to Ukraine. It got put off because of everything. But when I was looking at options, Vlad and everybody was telling me, oh yeah, you can do Poland, or depending where, you can fly into like Eastern Europe, Vienna, was it Bratislava, and you can also fly into Hungary. And I was like, I don't want to go into Hungary. Like at one point, I wanted to go to Budapest. Now I'm just kind of like, honestly, it creeps me out. Thank you, Chris. Like it just kind of creeps me out at this point. I just don't. All right, I'm just hoping she's not going to do this to me. There's a chance my dog's going to make me take her out. Let's see. Hopefully not, but here it is. All right, guys, I have to take the dog out. Sorry, we had a little issue earlier today. Explain to people what's going on. I was a little afraid this was going to happen. She was having a little issue earlier, and she's still having it. All right, come on. I will be right back. Explain to people why the hell I'm not here. All right, come on, Sasha. I just knew she was going to do this. All right, come on, you. I knew you were going to do this. I knew it. All right. Let's go. Oh, well. Sorry, guys. Not to get into too much detail, but, she's a 14-year-old dog. Well, she's turning 14. Thank you, Danon. And she's been having a hard time going today. We'll put it that way. So right before the show, I took her out, and it took a while, and I could tell things weren't quite happening. So I was a little worried this was going to happen, and it did. So that she was going to be like, let's try again. So, and what do? You know how it is. The dog's got to go. The dog's got to, well, dogs, especially, I laugh at people who don't. It's like one of the neighbors, thank you, Mandashi, one of the neighbors in DC where I live. It's an apartment building, but they don't like dogs in their lawn. And I think it's the funniest thing because they've got like signs up, don't let the dog poo on the lawn. It's kind of crap. And they literally yell at people. Thank you, Jenna. And I get it. Like, thank you, Hazel. Like on plants and stuff, I get it because plants get killed. But if too many dogs pee on them and stuff. But like a dog crapping on your lawn, there's nothing you can do about it. And you pick it up. There's nothing you can do. I mean, when a dog's got to go, it's like a little kid. When a dog's got to go, he's got to go. There's literally nothing you can do. Oh my God. Anyway. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you for hanging on here. Doggy daycare in the States? Of course we do. Yeah. But I'm not going to put my dog in doggy daycare for my show. Oh, anyway. All right. Oh, she's trained for the litter box. I've got the litter box back in DC, but she only uses it when it rains. She won't use the litter box otherwise. She's my funny girl. All right. Let's keep going here. Hungary being evil. Thank you, Jono, for that. Norway will provide 1 billion Norwegian kroner, 89 million in additional funding to domestic humanitarian aid organizations operating in Ukraine. All right, that is it I've got for Ukraine news. Let me pull this up and we will do Israel and Gaza next. Thank you. Who is it? Kate Lee. Thank you. I thought it said Kate Lee. Kate Lee, thank you for that. Make sure I got the right stuff here. I do. All right. And you know what I'll do? Let me show you a couple of our auction items and then I'll show the rest of the auction items later. We do auctions every week over in my Discord community, and basically we auction off cool stuff from Ukraine. 50% of the auction proceeds we channel back into Ukraine. 50% are for me because I do this full time, and the way I'm able to afford to do this full time is your guys' gifts, which is why I thank you for the gifts, like from Gamma right there, and for the auctions and things like that we do. So let me show you a couple of, it's discord.aravosis.com, or if you have Discord, just type in Aravosis and look for it. But I'll show you guys the ornaments first, because we have more ornaments. I'm going to do ornaments every week until right before Christmas. You got to have time to get them. This one is especially pretty, I think. Oh, you okay? Here, come on up. Come on up. There you go. All right. She's back. This one's very pretty. I like because it's got the traditional couple on it, which I think is really beautiful. Here you guys can see. It's sort of wearing the traditional Ukrainian sort of spring outfit with the woman with the long ribbons and the flowers in her hair. And then the back of it, she signed, sort of it means sort of Merry Christmas, but it says, something the Ukrainians say, Vlizniki, or which is the name of the town, 2023. So very pretty. Let me show you the other two, and then I'll show you the rest of the stuff later. This is one that is just flowers, but it's the Petrikivka style. Very pretty with the flowers. Same thing on the back. It's got the Merry Christmas from the name of the town. So that's the back with the Merry Christmas. And you can see the flowers, but very pretty. It's the traditional Petrikivka style. And the final one is also very cool. I mean, these two of them, the white and the black, are 5 inches, which is huge, like 12 centimeters. This one's really neat too. It's a Christmas angel, which is really pretty. And again, you have to see it in person to really appreciate the colors and everything. It's just beautiful. But with the flowers, again, the name of the town in the back, Merry Christmas. But I just think it's really, really pretty. So there you go. So we're bidding on these. Feel free, guys. The auctions end Wednesday. I put stuff up late, but what do you do? There's some more stuff up there. The auctions end on Wednesday, so do go check them out. Discord.aravosis.com. All right. Let's do Israel now, and then we'll do Q&A afterwards, okay? Quick sip of water. Please do keep the gifts coming on TikTok and YouTube. And as always, like I said, super chat questions on YouTube. I will always do those as the next issue I talk about. How do you bid? The instructions are there. Go to the Discord community. It's free. Thank you for the swan there, swan lady or swan guy. Thank you, Napoleon. But if you go to the Discord, there's 2 areas. One area is VIP for the monthly subscribers on TikTok, on Discord. Not TikTok. TikTok doesn't connect it because TikTok's evil. TikTok's not evil, but they broke the connection. the monthly subscribers on Discord, Ko-fi, YouTube, Twitch. There's a special section for them, and then the public auction is everybody. You go there and there's instructions. It's like Webadeb is, well, Webadeb, that doesn't quite tell them how to do it because she's thinking you write /bid $. It's in the description of each auction, though there's an example how to bid. It's basically /bid space and then the amount of money in dollars. So 50. All right, let me keep going, guys. Israel. So the U.S. conducted another round of strikes against targets in eastern Syria. You know that U.S. troops have been pretty much attacked in Iraq and Syria almost every day since Hamas did the attacks in Israel on October 7th. These are Iranian-backed groups that have been attacking the U.S. Biden didn't want to basically piss off Iran and getting into a big shooting match with Iran. So he was responding, but holding back in his response. Intentionally not killing anybody or injuring anybody. So the responses the U.S. did until this latest response didn't even injure anybody. It was destroying weapons and things. This latest response, the U.S. believes killed or injured several people on the ground, the people being militants associated with Iran, of course. Let me see here. On Sunday night, an Air Force F-15E, thank you, Courtney, fighter jets struck several buildings in Abu Kamal, Syria, used for training, logistics, and storing munitions, as well as a safe house in Mayadeen, used as a command headquarters. The Pentagon said on Sunday that there have been at least 48 attacks against U.S. forces in Syria and Iraq since October 17th. So that's just like the last 3 weeks, maybe. And that at least 56 U.S. service members have been injured, about half of them suffering traumatic brain injuries, and 2 had to be flown to Germany for treatment. So clearly what we're hearing is these attacks were more significant, I think, than we're being told. Obviously, if half of them are having traumatic brain injuries or symptoms associated with traumatic brain injuries. One thing that worried me in these stories was some people were criticizing Biden, saying that, thank you, Aiden, and thank you, Running on Coffee. Some people were criticizing Biden, saying he was being too cautious in his response, that he wasn't hitting back hard enough because he was, afraid of angering Iran, whatever. And I have to say, there is a logic to what Biden is doing, which is, it's probably better for the U.S. and the world if Iran and the U.S. don't go to war. So fair enough. And if we start going to war with Iran, then Hezbollah, which is right north of Israel, so southern Lebanon, terrorist group there associated with Iran, they could invade from the north, which is a big problem for Israel. So lots of things could happen if we got into a shooting war with Iran that aren't good. Having said that, I read these statements from the Biden administration about basically pulling punches and, blowing up warehouses, but making sure we don't hurt any of the terrorists because we don't want to piss off Iran. And to me, having studied Ukraine for a year and a half plus, it feels like Ukraine all over again. And I mentioned this in one of my broadcasts with you guys. I forgot when it was, but the last couple of weeks, because it was about Israel and Gaza. And I said, I hope Biden doesn't do the same thing where basically he's afraid of it turning into something bigger and he starts pulling punches and it empowers the bad guys to think Biden's not going to respond. Any case, but as I said, there's also a method to his madness in that I can understand why you want to be careful about getting into a shooting war with Iran. So I get that. Nonetheless, a little more here. Fuel and refugee trucks. Okay, there's a few main topics we're going to talk about. One of them, fuel and refugee trucks. So there are ongoing concerns about fuel. The Israelis have stopped letting fuel in. Mind you, it was fuel coming from Israel, but nonetheless, they've stopped letting fuel in. That they don't want it to go to Hamas, but the problem is, of course, the fuel goes to a lot of other things, such as hospitals and other things. The UN, for example, the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine, one of the UN agencies for refugees, says it has no fuel to fill its trucks in Gaza and will not be able to facilitate aid deliveries through southern Gaza because of the lack of fuel. But a total of 154 aid relief. What I'm going to try to do here is not present both sides, so to speak, but present again to you why I say that this issue is so confusing and so murky. First, you get the UN agency say there's no fuel left. We can't transport anything, right? Then you get an update from the Egyptians saying 154 aid trucks made their way into Gaza on Monday, which is a record, at least for the war. It's not a record before the war. Thank you, Courtney. Before the war, I think you had 350 aid trucks a day coming. So it's still half of that. It's not enough, right? But it's a lot compared to what there was before. So the UN is saying there's no more fuel. Aid trucks can't come in. The Egyptians say a record number of aid trucks came in. Both are probably true, meaning that UN agency no longer has fuel, but other agencies do have fuel. My point here, though, is when I first read the UN story, I thought, holy shit, they're out of fuel completely. Nobody's bringing in aid. And then I happened to read the story elsewhere from the Egyptians saying, no, 154 aid trucks got in. That's a record, at least since the war started. That's why I say this is complicated. I don't think the UN is lying, but I do think let's put it this way. That UN agency, when it put out that statement, didn't have a problem with the fact that the statement was confusing. They didn't have a problem that the statement made it sound like there wasn't any fuel coming in at all. Now, but we still know that fuel is a problem across Gaza. Anyway, I'm going to say more on this. So yeah, the aid trucks came in, bringing in food, water, relief items, medical equipment, and medications, according to the Egyptian border official. But it's only half the number of aid trucks from before the war started. So it's not enough. 10 buses carrying 564 foreign nationals departed Gaza for Egypt on Monday today as well. So that's a good sign. It also means they got fuel, which takes us to the discussion of the hospital. There's been a lot of talk today about was it Al-Arifa? I'm saying Al-Arifa. I'm saying Arifa because of Arifa's name on TikTok. That's very funny. Al-Shifa, not Al-Arifa. I don't know if Arifa's here today. I think I saw you today already, didn't I? That's very funny. Al-Shifa Hospital, which is the largest hospital in Gaza. Lot of talk about this hospital. It is another case study in how bad things are happening, but you are there. Okay. I called the hospital the Al-Arifa Hospital. I've got you on the brain. It's Al-Shifa. This is another case study in why this issue drives me crazy, because it's just like all over the place. So listen to this. Okay. Biden today said that Gaza Strip's hospitals must be, this was basically a little bit of a slap at Israel today. Biden said Gaza's hospitals must be protected. He said today, as Israeli troops battle to seize control, all right. So Israel is Israel. Let me read Biden's quote. There's so much to tell you here. So Biden's statement, the United States. Okay. No, Biden's statement says they must be protected, but our national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, Biden's top foreign policy guy at the White House, says yesterday the same thing. The U.S. does not want to see firefights in hospitals where innocent people, patients receiving medical care, are caught in the crossfire. And we've had active consultations with Israel's defense forces on this. So the first thing is we are absolutely seeing a more critical tone coming out of the White House. They're still going to support Israel. I mean, Israel is our ally. But interesting that they're getting more critical, and interesting that yesterday was Biden's national security advisor. Today was Biden himself. That's interesting. When you have the president himself come out and say, do not do this, find a way around hitting hospitals. That's serious. Typically, that's the kind of thing, especially somebody like Biden that's very schooled in diplomacy, it's the kind of thing you would do privately. You wouldn't do it publicly. You do it publicly when your private discussions are not amounting to anything, when they're not helping. And clearly, Biden came to the decision that he thinks that Israel is hitting too many civilians, he thinks that Israel's gone a little too far with hitting civilians. Yeah, he does, clearly. And he thinks that basically Netanyahu isn't listening to him. And that's why he's going public. Let me see here. New York Times, conditions at Gaza's main hospital, Al-Shifa, which I was saying are dire. This is from the Times. Thousands of seriously ill and wounded patients and displaced people have been trapped inside, while Israeli tanks and troops surround the compound, with snipers occasionally firing off shots, according to Gaza's health ministry, doctors, and some witnesses. Nearby, there is intense close-quarter combat between Israeli troops and fighters from Hamas, the armed Palestinian group that controls Gaza. Now, I read that, and one thing that bothered me, I will say with this is, I was saying, okay, Israel's near the hospital. Israel's firing near the hospital. Israel's firing near the hospital because apparently Hamas is at the hospital, and Hamas is firing at Israel from near the hospital. Why are Hamas fighters near the hospital? Why are they there at all? No, I mean, this, I will say, this doesn't mean I am happy to concede to Biden on this because he knows more than I do about what's going on. If Biden is concerned that Israel's going a little too far with the civilian thing, then I will cede that to Biden. I do worry that once again, actually, Jake Tapper brought this up on CNN today too. Thank you, Hazel. We are very quick to blame Israel, and we are very, very, what's the word I'm looking for the opposite? We are very loath to blame Hamas for anything in this war. And this is a perfect example. Israel's firing around the hospital because Hamas is firing around the hospital. Thank you, Raul. They're there because Hamas is there. There's snipers and gunshots going on, according to the staff. Thank you, H63 Tom, because they're firing at Hamas and Hamas is firing back. Why is Hamas near that hospital? Right? I mean, and why aren't we hearing people talk about it? Why aren't we hearing? Nobody is talking about Hamas being near that hospital and whether Hamas is endangering people by putting its troops near that hospital. That bothers me. Thank you, Lion. And again, happy to criticize Israel for this, but don't criticize Israel if you're not going to criticize. Oh, I'm getting to it, Chris. Don't worry. Chris on Facebook. It's next. There's more on that hospital. So hang on a second. I'm going to put these notes away. Yes. Okay. More on this. Speaking of that hospital, we're going to talk more about that hospital in a minute here. One of the issues with that hospital, Al-Shifa, is the fuel. Reportedly, babies have died, that they had to take babies off of incubators because there's no fuel for the Al-Shifa hospital, the main hospital in Gaza. Let me read this to you. Israel, now, what's interesting about this story is Israel and the Palestinians have different stories here. The only problem is the story the Palestinians give is even worse for Palestinians and for Hamas. Listen to this. New York Times. The Israeli military said in a statement that its troops had placed 300 liters of fuel for urgent medical purposes at Al-Shifa's entrance, but that Hamas prevented the hospital from receiving the fuel. New York Times adds, the military's chief spokesman later said that the fuel had been left about 1,000 feet from the hospital. Okay? A couple paragraphs down, the New York Times says, Dr. Ashraf Al-Qudra, a spokesman for Gaza's health ministry run by Hamas, of course, a spokesman for Gaza's health ministry disputed those assertions. So Israel's assertion was they placed 300 liters of fuel outside the hospital. He says in an interview, he, the spokesman for Gaza's health ministry, said an offer had been made over the phone for 200 liters, not 300 liters. Okay. So instead of Israel placing 300 liters, Israel had offered 200 liters. Okay, so it's a little bit less, or it's a third less, 200 liters, and they had offered it. They hadn't given it yet. He goes, and you go, why didn't the Israelis give it? Listen to this, why the Israelis didn't actually give them the 200 liters. Thank you, Lori. That's insane. Thank you for that. Listen to this. Beep, 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 beep. The head of the Al-Shifa hospital, this is from the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, said the head of the Al-Shifa hospital rejected the offer of 200 liters of fuel from Israel because it was not sufficient. It wasn't enough. He wanted more, so he said, don't give us any. The fuel was not delivered. Here's the quote from the Palestinian official. Taking this fuel would give Israel credit for allowing fuel into Gaza. They didn't want to take the fuel for the hospital where babies were dying, A, because it wasn't enough, they wanted more, so they said, don't give us any, and B, they didn't want Israel to get credit, so they didn't give the money. They didn't give the fuel. Now, of course, the Palestinians are trying to deny it, and some people on TikTok are saying it's not true. Here's the problem. Your own health minister said it. The Gaza health ministry said it in an interview. He said it. Is he lying? Is the Hamas-led Gaza health ministry lying about what happened at that hospital? Bottom line is, this is why I tell you guys, this story is so complicated and so messy. And one time you find one person doing something wrong, you're going to find the other person doing something wrong too. And this is, again, Biden is upset with Israel, saying there's too many civilian casualties. Biden feels like whatever they're doing at this hospital is too much. And if Biden feels that way, I am willing to agree with Biden. I am willing to believe that, right? But what bothers me is stuff like this makes you then wonder, right? For example, too, by the way, are those deaths at that hospital, and you know they are, the deaths at the hospital that now seem to have been caused, at least in part, because the Palestinians refused the fuel the Israelis gave them? Were those deaths added to the 11,000 deaths that we're to believe Israel caused in Gaza? Because you know they were. And you know there's still 700 deaths in that list of 11,000 from the hospital that the Palestinians bombed themselves when their rocket went bad. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, a terrorist organization, all 99% of the experts now agree. It was a Palestinian rocket that hit the hospital. Now, that doesn't mean Israel didn't do other bad things, but that figure is still included, I will bet you, in the 11,000 that the Palestinians are citing and the 11,000 that our media keeps repeating, 11,000 civilians. By the way, our media has already admitted this, but they don't ever say this. You know how the number's up to 11,000 now? Thank you, 863 Tom, of civilians who are killed. Do you know that includes all the Hamas fighters who were killed? It does. Thank you, Napoleon. They've admitted this. When you look through the stories, some of the stories will tell you on the big newspapers, some of them will admit and say, the Palestinian ministry does say that this includes, they do not distinguish between Hamas terrorists killed and citizens killed. What bothers me about this is, once again, trying to get a straight answer on this issue, I think from either side is not very fun and easy, but it pisses me off that we're being given data like this that is not correct. I'm sorry, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like that we're being told 11,000 when we know it's including figures that the Palestinians killed themselves by accident, at least, when we know it's including Hamas terrorists. So granted, maybe it's 5,000, which would still be a lot, fair enough, but it pisses me off that we're using numbers that we don't even know the truth to because we're relying on Hamas, okay? And in the hospital's case, it's all over the world today about those kids dying in this hospital. This is the story of the day, guys, that these kids died in this hospital. And only the New York Times is telling you that they turned down the fuel from the Israelis in the hospital where the kids died because they didn't have fuel. You know, this story is so screwed up. It's so screwed up. Anyway, I will also say this. Anybody who thinks what I'm telling you right now simply can't be true, that Hamas, a terrorist group, would never, Hamas, a terrorist group that literally burned babies in Israel, that literally is holding babies hostage. We found out today from the White House, yesterday actually, that a 3-year-old boy is one of the hostages, an American 3-year-old. Thank you, TikToker. They took an American 3-year-old boy. He's one of the hostages that they're holding in Gaza. That these guys who kill pregnant women, all right, Webadeb, cover your ears. One story is cut into a pregnant woman's, I read it again today, cut into a pregnant woman's stomach and dragged the fetus across the ground. I mean, it's back. You're okay, Deb. Disgusting what these guys do. That these same people would never cut fuel to a hospital. They wouldn't do that. That might kill people because they don't kill people, right? I mean, this issue, guys, is just, but again, look at the naysayers. I mean, TikTok always cracks me up with this because it's people who say it can't be true. Again, ask yourself why it can't be true. Because Hamas isn't a terrorist group? Thank you, Hillel. Because Hamas doesn't kill people? I mean, you know, at some point, I got news for you. This is a story where there's literally both sides. Sometimes that thing your parents taught you as a kid about there being both sides to a story, sometimes there isn't. Like in Ukraine, it really isn't a both sides story. Russia's just being evil and Russia just wants the land. In the Middle East, there's not only both sides, there's like, you know, a dodecahedron size of stuff going on. Cliff, is it true that Russia has informed Hamas, Egypt, that they will intervene if Israel doesn't stop at Shifa Hospital? I don't know, but I wouldn't be too worried about it. Let the Russians try. First of all, Israel's a nuclear country. So, you know, let Russia try to intervene. If Russia wants a war with America, let them. But the problem here is, well, let me put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia threatened to intervene because Biden has made clear that he's afraid of attacking, he's afraid of pissing off Russia. So if I was Russia, I'd do the same thing in the Middle East. I'd go, you know what? Thank you, Sean. I've already threatened Biden nonstop with war in Ukraine. And frankly, it made Biden pull his punches. He didn't give Ukraine the weapons it needed. He drew out He draw out, right, the shipment of the weapons to Ukraine, and now the war is stalemated, and it's not clear it's not clear what's going to happen in the war now in Ukraine, guys. I mean, it really isn't. They could be screwed at this point because we screwed them over. I mean, we are at the point in Ukraine that Biden wanted. Biden, the French, and the Germans wanted a stalemate, and they got one. They didn't want Ukraine to win. They didn't want Ukraine to lose. They got it. Ukraine didn't lose, but they didn't win. And I worry about the same thing in the Middle East. And if I were Russia, I did not hear about this, Cliff, but if I were Russia, I would do exactly what Cliff just said. I would say, oh, they better watch it or we're going to intervene, so that Biden goes, Russia threatened to intervene. Oh, my God. We better do what they want. It'll be nuclear war. And we start that bullshit again. Even though, by the way, Russia could afford a second war far less than we can. Russia is, hanging in there with Ukraine. I mean, it's a stalemate, right? Russia needs to build up new weapons to keep fighting in Ukraine. Russia can't afford to go to war in the Middle East. And again, we're still bigger than Russia. They attack the U.S., whatever, we've got NATO behind us. So I wouldn't be surprised if Russia's saying that, but also Russia can't afford to get into war with us in the Middle East. Because bottom line is the U.S. will defend Israel. If it comes to the point where Israel is threatened, the U.S. will defend them. They will. They absolutely will. And by the way, when it really comes down to it, Israel's got nuclear weapons. I mean, if it really comes down to an existential threat for Israel, they've got nukes too. So Russia can play games, but Russia does not want to screw around with another country that's got nuclear weapons. So Israel won't use them unless Israel has to use them, like any country. If your existence is threatened, you would use nukes, because better to live having used nukes than to die and lose your country not having used nukes. So I think I'd be curious to look into that. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia said it, though, because that's classic Russia, just trying to stir the pot and scare everybody. A little more. Thank you, Hazel, for the gift. What else we got here? And I forgot to mention, by the way, getting back to fuel, guess who else has fuel? Hamas. Matt Miller from the State Department, who's their spokesman, weighed in today. He blamed Hamas for not providing fuel of its own reserves to its hospitals, which is true. If Hamas truly cared for the people in Al-Shifa and other hospitals in the north, it could take the fuel that it's using to protect its fighters and to send it to the hospitals that they could protect their patients, and they're not doing that. The New York Times and NBC News both did stories, and they interviewed Western officials and Middle Eastern officials, governments in the area from the Middle East, Arab governments, who said that Hamas had, I forget the amount now, but Hamas had a lot of fuel, a lot of medicine, a lot of water and food and weapons. But the special thing, they had fuel. And they were refusing to give any of it to their own people and the head of Hamas, I think it was the head of Hamas that was interviewed about this. I think he did it with Cristiano Amanpour, or maybe it was one of the networks in the Middle East. And he was asked about this, and he said, we don't need to provide anything to the Palestinians. Officially, the Palestinians are refugees, and the refugees, it's the job of the United Nations to provide for them. We don't have to provide for them. So the official position of the government of Gaza, that, mind you, the Palestinians voted for a long time ago. They made a big mistake there, but they voted for these jokers. And then these jokers took over and never let go. They don't hold elections anymore. But the official position of the government of Gaza, run by Palestinians, is they're not responsible. They're not responsible for helping Palestinians. It's the UN's job. But how many of you out there, and I'll ask you guys right here, the ones that are being kind of nasty on TikTok, it's always TikTok. You guys are lovely. The YouTubers, the Twitchers, the Facebookers are lovely. TikTok, I love most of you on TikTok, but some of you are just idiots. But the TikTok folks that are complaining and stuff, how many of them have ever complained that babies are dying and Hamas is sitting on fuel? I'm going to guarantee none of them have said a thing. None of them have said a thing. But it's not, I say TikTok. I'm joking bringing up TikTok. But I'm saying for everybody else. You know what? Thank you, Patty. That across the world, we see people protesting Israel. We don't see anybody mentioning even once that, again, there are some gray areas here. All right, a little bit more here. Oh, this is great too. U.S. official with knowledge of American intelligence says Hamas has a command mode. This was Shoot, I didn't write down. This was CNN. This was it. I was reading too many news sources before we came on with you guys. This is either CNN, the New York Times, or the Washington Post. I'd have to Google and see which one. A U.S. official with knowledge of American intelligence says Hamas has a command node under the Al-Shifa hospital. So Hamas, according to U.S. intelligence officials, actually has a command post under the hospital that everybody's complaining about. What a surprise. Using fuel intended for the hospital and its fighters. Wait, hold on. Has a command node under Al-Shifa Hospital, uses fuel intended for the hospital and its fighters regularly. Oh, they're using. Okay, this is the lack of commas, by the way, in our media today. Young people who can't write, uses fuel intended for the hospital, comma, and its fighters regularly cluster in and around Al-Shifa. Hamas and hospital officials have denied the accusation. I'll bet they have. The U.S. officials' information comes after comments made Sunday by a top White House official that the hospital, which is the largest one in Gaza, was being used not just to treat civilians, a U.S. official said on Sunday. A top White House official, quote, "You can see even from open source reporting that Hamas does use hospitals, along with a lot of other civilian facilities for command and control, for storing weapons, for housing its fighters." Again, I present to you, you're okay. I present to you gray. It's all gray. And, bottom line, I'm going to end the Israel part now. Bottom line is, and again, if the Biden administration wants to be critical of Israel and what's going on with the hospitals, then I will take that at face value, because Biden drives me crazy as far as standing up to the Russians and stuff. But if he's going to be critical of the Israelis, he's being critical of the Israelis for a valid reason. I trust him much more than Netanyahu on that, right? What bothers me is the Israelis are fighting an enemy who attacked them first. And don't give me this bullshit about 75 years ago. These guys attacked Israel. It was vicious. It was awful. I actually did the math. I think it was 15, 9, it was 15. In terms of Israel's population, only 10 million people. This attack was equal to 15 9/11s, 15 September 11s. Okay, that the number of Israelis that were killed. Hamas hides among civilians. They don't care. They've said themselves they don't care about civilians. They've also said, by the way, Hamas officials in the last few weeks, that they're fine with civilians dying because they're martyrs. And it's important for martyrs to die and blah, 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 blah. So new report this weekend, actually, I think it was Washington Post. They wanted Israel to do just this. They thought they wanted an attack that was so vicious that it would cause the Israelis to go nuts, kill civilians, and inflame the Middle East. And they got it. What bothers me with all of this is Israel, again, if Biden's saying it, I'm going to go along with it. Israel probably could be more careful about civilian casualties, okay? What bothers me is that we know that Hamas wants to kill civilians. We know that Hamas doesn't care about Palestinian civilians. And more importantly, we know that Hamas is using Palestinian civilians as human shields. They are using them not only to prevent attacks, but they're using them knowing that if Israel does attack, Palestinians will die and it will become a propaganda weapon for Hamas. Thank you, Jeremy. And when you are fighting an enemy, when the government of the state next to you, whatever you want to call it, territory, state, whatever, when the elected government, originally elected, invades you, slaughters your people, and then goes back and hides behind its own people, do you sit there and do nothing? And I think too many people aren't answering that question. And this, once again, comes to the point of, I think too many people in the world are always ready to criticize Israel, and they're never ready to criticize the bad guys. And they're never ready to criticize Hamas. They're never ready to they'll never criticize the Palestinians for 75 years of Palestinian terrorism against Jews worldwide and others, frankly, not just Jews. They will always criticize the Israelis. And that's what bothers me with this issue, because it is a much more complicated issue, as we've just discussed. And I just think people should be more nuanced. They can be concerned about Israel. You can be concerned about the hospitals, but then you also should be concerned about the fact that these hospitals are being used as human shields. Thank you, Minnie. And at least say, I'm not sure what Israel should do because they are put in a hard spot. Thank you, JR. But I still don't like them killing civilians. That's fine. That's fine. But don't just sit there and say, oh, yeah, the Israelis just like to kill babies when, the other guys are the ones who wanted the babies killed. In any case, it just pisses me off. All right. Let me show you a couple more auction items. On that note, let me show you a couple more auction items. For our Discord auction. Like I said, we do a Discord auction every Wednesday. Well, it's ongoing, but every Wednesday, the auctions end. 50% of them, thank you, Dawn. 50% of the auction proceeds we send back to Ukraine. Lately, we've been using it to help the military with drone parts and drone trainings and things like this. We actually got a nice pair of videos for the drone training fundraiser we did. We were raising money for a drone training center, and I put up 2 videos on Discord of them thanking us. So thank you guys for that, showing the parts they bought and everything. But a couple of the other items this week, I've got a smaller group of things since I was flying. Ukrainian military patch. This one's kind of neat because it's green. It actually is more. I thought it was brown yesterday. It's more green when I look at it. I believe it's the Ukrainian trident. It's a real Ukrainian military patch from Ukraine, but not. It's new. It hasn't been used. What I think this patch is about is some of the patches are made dark because Ukraine's colors are blue and gold or blue and yellow, right? They're very bright colors. These patches, I believe, are made dark because you want them to basically not stand out at night so people are worried about snipe. I think it's is this not the same thing as some of the other patches where I was told there's the concern about snipers? And you basically at night, especially, you want to look dark. You don't want bright, shiny things. So I wonder if that's not part of what's going on. In any case, it's a very cool Ukrainian military patch. People like this one a lot. We've got a couple ornaments from the Ukrainian post office. These are, well, they're ornaments and they're fridge magnets both, which is kind of cool. And it's funny. I mean, there's a star across a starry background. This is a cat eating a sausage out in the snow, and then it says "Happy Holidays" on the bottom in Ukrainian. Very cute. I'm not sure what the cat eating sausages is about, but it is what it is. And then finally, 2 other things. Another fridge magnet. This is the Petrokivka style the Ukrainians make. This is a fridge magnet made by that woman who, same woman who designed the ornaments, actually. And you can see it's much, I did a picture that's not as good of it, but here you can see it's very pretty. That's fridge magnet. And it's the same woman who designed the ornaments I showed you guys. And then the final piece is a little keychain from Ukraine. That's just the trident, Ukrainian trident, but it's very pretty. And I thought it was kind of cute. So just kind of a simple little keychain. Very good, male or female. So very cool. Oh, I've got the other patches. Yeah, Bernardo. I've got the Azov patches. Wait till I auction those again. We do great with those. You'd be fab. You'd be so excited. Mods, Bernardo's getting a pair of wings. Just so you know. Thank you. Perfect. All right. So here we go, guys. That's the last keychain I've got. Yeah. I don't have any more of those keychains. Last one. Now I need more water. I just finished my water. I'll survive. All right, guys. So let's sorry, adventurers. Oh, that's awful. Let's do Q&A. So we can do Ukraine, we can do Israel, etc. Let's go, guys. So what do you got? I know. I'm okay with water at the moment. I don't want to be peeing all night. Arab countries vetoed sanctions against Israel. I'm not sure what that's about. Actually. Military operations in Rentisi? Nope. Vlad is okay. I talked to Vlad today. Thank you, Sean, for the gift. I mean, he's doing okay. He's hanging in there. I think for all Ukrainians, it's getting, it's hard. This has been going on a long time. And, I think they're all getting worried. I mean, yeah, watch it, Tula Kiwi. Oh, a cat in a butcher deli? Maybe. There had to be something, David. Oh, thank you. Who was that? Timothy. Thank you, Timothy. There had to be something with the cat. It's got to be picking up on a meme or something in Ukraine. Vlad wasn't aware, but there's got to be. Input about an EMP. What, you think the Russians are going to use an EMP or what? Gatti, I'm not sure what your question means. Would you side with either side? Oh, wait a minute. Would you side with either side when it comes to Israel or just a ceasefire? I'm not sure what the question means. Thank you, Danan. I'm not sure I get the sense that you're asking more about just a ceasefire. I mean, the ceasefire, I understand where Israel's coming from with this. Because, first of all, okay, Israel should do a better job of, well, in principle, I mean, it sounds like they did try to do a job of getting fuel there. But I think, again, if the U.S. is asking for more help in Israel getting humanitarian supplies in, then I will believe that that Israel isn't doing what it could, right? If Biden's going to say that. So a ceasefire would help in that regard. I am much more fond of a partial ceasefire in some areas to get aid in. I think doing 5-day ceasefires, I can see where Israel's coming from on that. Like, why the hell should we help Hamas? Give them 5 days to dig in, give them 5 days to sleep, to catch up, to resupply or whatever. So that worries me a little. Also, from Israel's perspective, I get the humanitarian side, but having said that, these guys, Gaza declared war on Israel. And I think what bothers me about this, here's another thing. And this, again, is where with Israel, they treat it differently. And also Palestinians, they treat it differently. If a Middle Eastern country attacked Israel, or well, forget Israel, attacked each other. Iraq attacked Iran back in, 1981 or so. Nobody said, oh, I don't know. I guess, but my point is with that, like, people worry about civilians, but they treat it differently with the Palestinians, as though the civilians are totally disconnected from the government, whereas every Arab country, the civilians are disconnected from the government. I mean, Jordan has a freaking king, right? Egypt has a dictator. I mean, Lebanon, the south of the country, isn't even represented by their government. It's represented by terrorists. So, I mean, Assad, it's a family dictatorship. The Saudis, family dictatorship. I mean, none of these places are represented by their people. It just, I don't know. Whatever. I guess I'm from it. I get it from an Israeli perspective, why they're going, why the hell should we have a ceasefire? Because, they attacked us first. They declared war and we're not allowed to fight back. And what's a ceasefire really going to get us anyway? Are we going to have a ceasefire for 5 days to get supplies in? And then what happens? Then Israel attacks for another week and people want another ceasefire? I mean, I don't know. Again, I hope there's a way to somehow get supplies to the people themselves who need it. But, they kind of need to get people out of there is what they need to do. They need to probably move people out. I mean, supplies are fine, but if you're in northern Gaza, they need to get them out of there. And the UN or everybody else needs to get them either to southern Gaza or to Egypt or Jordan or wherever. But at this point, it's going to be, like I said, we have a ceasefire for 5 days, and then what? Israel starts bombing again. You don't think more people are going to die after the ceasefire? I mean, I guess my point is, thank you, Noah. How is a ceasefire going to stop babies from dying in 5 days? Let's say the ceasefire starts today. 5 days from now, the ceasefire stops. People start dying again. So how did the ceasefire help? It got some stuff in, but you're all going to be complaining in 5 days that Israel has to stop doing it. So the ceasefire isn't actually what you want. Thank you, Patty. Well, I mean, do you displace them is a question, but, leaving is probably better than dying at this point. I mean, I don't know what you do, but they're dying at this point, and Israel has to take out Hamas. They don't have a choice in that regard. They can try to do it more nicely, but I'll guarantee you there's probably no way for Israel to do this in a way that isn't going to kill civilians anyway, because Hamas is hiding among civilians. So do the civilians leave or do they stay? I mean, you can argue you don't like them leaving, okay, but do you like them dying? Sometimes you got to sort of pick the least worst option, I mean, well, okay. But as I said, the folks who want them to stay, then you want them to die, okay. Like Asgard, what the hell does that mean? Anyway, what else is going on? And the other thing too, my family left Greece because they were worried about the Germans invading. Came to America because they were afraid the Germans were going to invade Greece in the next year. And guess what? They did. And thank God my grandfather left. He had to leave his home because the Germans were coming. I mean, at some point, I think we play games sometimes with common sense as well. I'm sorry, but we really do. I'm not justifying anything on either side, but if war is coming, your country attacks the country next to you. in a horrifically brutal way, and the war therefore comes home to you and you decide to stay, I think that's stupid. It doesn't mean the other guy shouldn't be nicer when he's attacking you, but he's attacking you and he told you he was going to attack you and he told you where he was going to attack you and you decided to stay. I mean, that doesn't mean he should kill you, but it does mean you're kind of an idiot. Yeah, you know what? It was home in Greece too, where my family was, and they left because of World War II. Lots of people came to America because of wars and famine and everything else. Sometimes you have to leave your home, at least temporarily, to not get killed. So your solution is for them to get killed and be righteous about it. I don't think that gets you anywhere. Because it is true. Right now, some of you guys are saying, no, they should stay and die. And they'll stay and die, and I'll simply just criticize Israel and be very upset about it. Okay, that's nice, I guess, except that what you're proposing is that they die. Because you know Israel's not going to stop. So, right? I mean, this is where you've got to look at politics and think about actually what is happening, about actually what countries will and won't do. We know Israel's not going to stop. We know Israel can't stop. So you'd rather have the Palestinians die by not leaving? Because it's a principled stance you're taking when you know Israel's not going to stop? Then I question your principles, to be honest. You posted on Discord, Mike. What did you post on Discord? Sorry, Valerie. Thank you, Valerie, for this. Let me see, Valerie. Why is it up to Israel to support the Palestinians? Interesting question. Why aren't any other Arab countries or Hamas themselves being held responsible? Now, that's an interesting question. And I don't know enough to tell you, Valerie. What I mean by that is I've thought about that because people are saying, why does Israel have to provide the fuel and everything else? Here's the thing, okay? And we don't know enough here. We don't know enough here about what Israel's actually doing. In a bad way, I mean. What I mean by this is, and I've given the example before, but you can use any example you want. The Mexicans vote in a terrorist group as their government, or the drug lords. In Mexico, maybe it's the drug lords, right? They don't have terrorists; they have drug lords committing terrorism, right? So the Mexicans vote in the drug lords as their government, and the drug lords end up, what do you know, crossing the border secretly into America, which can happen, and they kill 46,000 Americans in one day. They declare war on the U.S., and the U.S. says, you know what? All that water and fuel and food and medicine we send you every day, we're not doing that anymore because you just declared war on us and killed 46,000 of our people. The problem is the next step, I think, not just I'm not trading with you, okay? Absolutely, I think any country that was attacked that way would stop trading with its neighbor. You're at war. You're not going to give them stuff. You're not going to give them anything if you're at war. Russia, we're not at war with. With the sanctions with Russia and Ukraine, we're still giving them medicine, but we didn't sanction medicine and stuff like that because we're not at war with Russia. If we were at war with Russia, we're not going to sell them medicine, right? We're not going to sell them anything. But the problem becomes, and I don't have an answer on this, what else is Israel doing? Is Israel stopping food, for example, from its own borders? Of course, Israel has to seal its own borders. Thank you, crazy American. But from Egypt, is Israel stopping aid trucks from coming in from Egypt? Or, in other words, I know the Egyptians have been a problem, but is Israel saying, no, if those trucks go in, we will blow them up? That's the thing I don't have a straight answer on. Because if they are, then it gets a little iffier. Now, I could see Israel saying we want to be careful what comes in because we want weapons coming in. Fair enough. But that gets trickier, right? I mean, and I just have not seen a definitive explanation of Israel's role with Rafah, which is the Egyptian border crossing, sort of what Israel's, and again, is Israel's role sort of stopping them from coming in? Or is Israel also saying, which they could, we're not going to do jack at the border, but once you cross that border, we'll blow you up if your truck hasn't been searched or whatever. That's possible too, right? But we don't have an answer, good or bad, is my point. And that's where Valerie's question comes in. I think once again, there's okay, that's a possibility too. Keith is saying there's no aid getting through. The roads are bombed. Unless it's airdropped, nobody's getting it. Well, the only problem with that, Keith, is there is aid coming in. Today, there was 150 trucks come in. So we know the aid's coming in. And I guess my question for that would be, I'm being sincere here. My question would be, why only 150 trucks today, right? Was it somebody said that's the only number that can come? Were there actually 3, 4? Okay, previously there were almost 400 trucks a day coming through. So were there 400 trucks ready and somebody said, no, 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 you can only let 150 in? Or were there only 150 trucks? Was somebody, you get it? Like who's not letting 400 trucks a day come in is my point. Is it Israel? Is it Egypt? Is it a capacity issue in the Egyptian side that they just can't process that many otherwise? But I've not seen anybody give a straight answer on this. You know, and it's important to know because it's, again, it's a more complicated issue than people are willing to admit, I think, because we can say blame Israel, but, well, again, we know Egypt has been playing a big role here and a big bad role. We know that, which is why I want a better answer to this, because we know Egypt's been screwing around. So anyway, thank you for that, Valerie. That's a good question. It's a good question, but it does raise sort of that question of we're not getting enough info here. Yeah, I mean, Cliff says Sisi, who's the dictator of Egypt, is opening and closing the Rafah gate according to his mood, but Egyptian army is telling that Gaza will attack Egypt also. Well, we know the Egyptians don't like the Palestinians. I mean, as far as Gaza, they don't like, because Hamas is there, and Hamas kind of going back has ties to, I guess, or its origins with Muslim Brotherhood, which is longtime problem terrorist group, sort of extremist group in Egypt. So the Egyptians really don't want, I mean, keep in mind, guys, the Israelis have people who say, Kunaya, you're about to leave. People who say that Israel has turned Gaza into an open air prison, like Mehdi Hassan says that. Mehdi doesn't bother mentioning to you that it wasn't just Israel that turned Gaza into what he calls an open air prison. Egypt did it too. Egypt doesn't let the border. Egypt has closed its border with Gaza for the last 17 years or so, just like Israel closed its borders. But nobody tells you that because, again, there is a propensity to blame Israel, to blame Jews, and not blame Arabs or anybody else. We don't play that. We always blame Israel. We always blame the Jews. We don't blame anybody else. And that's where people like me get concerned and think there is a role of anti-Semitism playing a role here. Or thank you, Super Hornet, or just a Israel hatred, whatever you want. It doesn't even have to be anti-Semitism, just a bias against Israel, that Israel screws up sometimes for sure, but that people don't want to criticize any of the other governments doing the same thing, like Egypt. We only talk about Israel. So anyway, if anybody, I'd like to find something sort of definitive on the aid truck issue. Oh, thank you for that. Who is that? Cassandra. Thank you for that, Cassandra. Anyway, what else we got? Any news on any new American aid packages for Ukraine? No, other than we're like at 96% of the U.S. money has been spent. So we don't have a lot of money left. There's no news on Congress. There was news this weekend, I forgot to mention, that Biden said this weekend. Let's see if Biden, I don't think there's a chance in a million years Biden will do this. Thank you, Addie. But Biden claimed this weekend that if the House Republicans don't provide aid to Israel and Ukraine in the aid package, the House Republicans just want to give money for Israel and not Ukraine, Biden says he'll not support the bill or veto it or whatever. I'm not sure that's true. I can't imagine Biden not letting Preston Stewart's very good. I like him a lot. Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, he's very good. Thank you, Lizard. Biden. I was saying something with Biden. And then I saw Preston Stewart and you threw me, although I appreciate you throwing it out there. I forgot what I was saying there. We're giving Israel money at all because they're the only democracy in the Middle East and they're our ally, and we don't get along well with a lot of the other countries, for starters. I mean, it goes back a lot. It also goes back to the Cold War, and the Soviets were on the side of the Palestinians and the Arabs, and we were on the sides of the Israelis. I mean, among other reasons. And I got to tell you, Israel strikes me as the least crazy country in the region. I mean, I got to say, doesn't mean you want them blowing up civilians, but as far as who our ally is, I wouldn't trust anybody else to be our ally in that region other than Israel. Not even close. Not even close. I think the other guys are a little nuts, to be honest. You know, I was talking about Biden vetoing the bill. Yes. Oh, thank you. You're right. Thank you, Funny. Yes. So we're talking about Biden putting out a message. I don't know if he said veto, but he said he wouldn't accept a bill that didn't include Ukraine funding. And I have a hard time believing that Biden would veto a bill with like basically stop aid from going to Israel if it didn't include Ukraine. Maybe he would. Honestly, I think that will require more backbone than Biden's got personally. But Javi, good to see you, and thank you for the question. I did see this today. Yeah. So former British Prime Minister David Cameron was made Foreign Secretary today, which is basically their Secretary of State. In regards to the Israel-Palestine issue, see, I know those flags at least, considering his former comments of calling the Gaza Strip a prison camp. That's interesting. Well, so, I mean, you're getting into the weeds on British policy that I'm not up on. I do know the woman who was, she's Home Secretary, whatever that is for you guys. But the woman who was the Home Secretary got fired today because she had made a comment about the pro-Palestinian protesters, and she criticized the police, but she also called the pro-Palestinian protesters, what did she call them, horrible or something? There was some word she used that was pretty nasty about them. And Sunak, the prime minister, fired her, moved the foreign secretary over to the Home Office, so Cleverly or whatever his name is, so he's no longer foreign. Braverman's the woman who was fired, yes, and appointed David Cameron, the old prime minister, as the new former foreign secretary. I just don't know enough about your guys' politics, other than that's interesting if he said that about Gaza, that it's a prison camp. Having said that, I might think Gaza's a prison camp too if I visited. I mean, but that doesn't mean I solely blame Israel. And let me go one step further. Not only would I not solely blame Israel, I blame Egypt too, but I also would blame 75 years of Palestinian terrorism on it as well. That it's not just like Israel said, hey, let's oppress Palestinians in Gaza this week for fun, right? I mean, they actually gave Gaza back to the Palestinians, and they removed, I think it was 50,000 people from Jewish settlements in Gaza. So they gave them a chance, and the Gazans elected a, terrorist group as their leadership in parliament. Yay! So, so I guess what I'm saying is I might agree that it's a prison camp, but I don't know who I'd put the blame on, Nah, you're not going to get back the land that was stolen, because the land wasn't really stolen. It was the United Nations that did it. This is one point I was been talking about with one of my nephews this weekend was, this whole thing about land being stolen, people need to sort of give it up at this point. It's been 100 years practically, well, 80 years. And you know what? The United Nations did it. Israel didn't do it. Jews didn't do it. United Nations did it. The world got together and divvied up the land. That's it. That's it. My mom is like slowly, are you joining us, Mom, or what are you doing?
Oh, no, I was wondering if the soup is ready.
Oh, okay, I'll come in a minute. I'm still doing this for a couple more minutes. No okay. It's good. I feel like I'm like the blogger in the basement thing. I know I get the Anthony Bourdain thing. I like him. I always find that funny, or liked him, but it always makes me laugh with that. Sorry, Harvey's saying Cameron is not an elected member of parliament anymore. Oh, that's interesting. He's having to be made a lord in order to be placed in government. It's that's why I saw somebody mention that they should have made Obama a lord and made him minister or something like that. And I was like, why would Obama have to be made a lord? I didn't realize that's how it works for you guys. Oh, funny. Oh, because if he's a lord, they can put him in the House of Lords, and then he's a minister, so to speak. I mean, he's a member of parliament. Right. Oh, funny. I didn't realize that. That's very interesting. Okay. That's interesting. So anyway. No, I blame a little bit of everybody. But yeah, but the thing is, I will say this, sort of for my closing here. I think the whole thing of, it's not, if anything, it's the United Nations' fault. It's not Israel's fault. Thank you, Amy. Israel didn't split up the land. The United Nations did it. The Brits helped. But guess what? The Brits had the land. It was the British land back then. It was their land. There were no countries there. There were no countries there at all. A lot of Arabs, but there were no countries. United Nations divvied it up. Israel got its state. Good for Israel. You don't like it? Too bad. Strasbourg is French now. It was German. Not German anymore. What are you going to do about it? You know, it was the United Nations. It wasn't Jews who took it. It wasn't Israel that took it. It was the United Nations that divvied it up. And it was the Ottoman Empire before that. And that what bothers me. That whole bullshit about people going back and trying to do original sin. No, you lost the land. That's the way the world works. 80 years ago, thank you, Cassandra, you lost the land, and that's it. And now you got to figure out what to do about it. Thank you, Tom. But I think all these, you know, even like the settlements, I think the Jewish settler, the Israeli settlers suck in the West Bank. Netanyahu sucks. But guess what? There was terrorism for 60 years before that. Thank you, Marie. Palestinian terrorism. They didn't need settlements in the West Bank to commit terrorism. They didn't need Netanyahu as prime minister to commit terrorism. You know, there was more than enough to go around of bad stuff, you know, from the beginning. So anyway, dismiss history. No, I'm just disagreeing about history with you. Big difference there. Keep in mind, folks, not everybody agrees with you. And that goes for the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. And it's okay for not everybody to agree with you. All right. So I'm going to sign off now because we've been doing this for an hour and a half and Mom's got soup ready. Woo woo. We're having lentils. Very Greek of us tonight. Sasha's tired. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I scared you. I'm sorry. You okay? It's okay. She was in a deep sleep and I went to pet her and it was one of those where the dog jumps like, sorry, that's okay. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to say sayonara. Thank you for the gifts. Oh, make sure I didn't miss anybody else. Thank you again for that, Harvey. Sorry, I just don't know enough about the background. Yeah. Oops. Get rid of this. Oops. Sorry. I'm showing Harvey's stuff again. And I will join you tomorrow night, right? So tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern time. So 6 p.m. Washington, D.C. or New York City time. I will join you guys. We've got our auctions. Don't forget the auctions. The cool ornaments from Ukraine and stuff, hand-painted, are over at our Discord. It's my Erevosis Discord, discord.erevosis.com, or just go to Discord and look for Erevosis. It's my forum. Look for the auction items, and each auction item, no soup, exactly. Each auction item, there will be a little description of how to bid. Or somebody can help you. If it gets confusing, ask for help in the comments. Thank you, Flower Lady. And somebody will help you out. But okay, guys. Oh, I just learned that word today, smachnoga. That's funny, Marie. I was asking Mom's Ukrainian helper, and she said it's smachnoga. Because we were asking in English, is there an expression like bon appetit? And we're saying, not really, you know? But I was asking her, and I guess smachnoga is sort of the same thing, like have a good appetite or something like that, I believe, right? I think that's what she said. So anyway, all right, guys, have a good night. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you, mods. Thank you, everybody, as well, in general. All right, see you guys. Have a good night. Oh, yeah, that music, by the way, was totally not my choice again. One of my videos on TikTok has music because TikTok did it again, and I didn't catch it. They throw music on every video unless you tell them not to. Each video, you have to turn off the damn music they throw on. It's annoying as hell.